Your Children TV. I am your host, Tiffany Boyd, and our mission here at For Your Children is to share the truth and love about education. There's a battle raging for the souls of our nation's children, and I hope this television show and this ministry equips you for battle. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the whole armor of God that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. Ephesians 6:10 through 11. We are committed here at For Your Children to protecting and preserving parental rights, educational rights, and constitutional rights. This show is dedicated to that. My ministry is dedicated to that. I've met some fantastic people along this journey. You can also find me if you would like more information about For Your Children at foryourchildren.com. We have a Spotify channel. I also have a radio show, and you can go there and listen to all of the shows that I have done, and you can also read the articles that I have written about education, and you can find the links to all of those over on my website. And again, that's foryourchildren.com. Today, I am very excited to have Courtenay Turner back in the studio with us. We had so much to talk about, Courtenay. We had to extend this into a second edition or a bonus edition, I guess. So welcome back.
Thank you.
Courtenay, tell our viewers where they can find you. Let's cover that right out of the gate.
Right out of the gate. That's CourtenayTurner.com, and it is Courtenay, but it's spelled like Courtenay, so that's CourtenayTurner.com. All of my podcasts, all my different social medias, and everything is there. So.
Fantastic, and I will make sure that I have information posted as well so viewers can find you. Courtenay and I met a while back. She has attended several of the seminars that I have done. I've been traveling across the state of Tennessee hosting seminars in the hopes that we educate parents on exactly the roots of what we see happening today in education, where we are currently and where we're headed in the future. So our goal is to, of course, educate so we can empower and hopefully change the tide of what we see happening. And so Courtenay and I agree on probably most things, I would say. We've done several shows together now at this point. She has been deep in the mire and the muck and the circus in the legislature this session, following bills, going and speaking to legislators about why we are opposed to the scam of school choice. And we've spoken about that at length in previous shows that we have done. Fundamentally, we do not agree with school choice because we know and understand what the government funds it runs. We know that it erodes freedoms, and the entire goal behind school choice is to globalize education so that the government controls all forms of education, effectively destroying true private education. So Courtenay has been a trooper. She's been at the Capitol with us, and we were just there this week, actually, in a very long session. I believe we were there for probably 10 hours or more that day. But you came, we were in the House. We were in the House Subcommittee for Finance, Ways, and Means here in Tennessee. And tell us about what your perspective was on what you were seeing as someone sitting in, I'm just going to say audience because it felt like a show.
Right? It was a show. It was a show, a spectacle, a circus, all those things. It was very disorganized. It was not very professional. It was not very focused. I didn't feel like they really knew what they were addressing. So things were being presented, and it was as if they had no idea what these things were. But they were very protective over their budgets. That was very clear. That much they knew. They got that memo. And it seemed also like there was just, I keep talking about this, but there's just this divide. So they know what the target is, and we're supposed to fight, if one side versus the other. They're not really paying much attention to what's actually in the bill or what they're actually trying to
I agree with that. I think for many of these legislators and even the general public, they just look at things from the perspective of R and D. So if you're a conservative, if it's a bill that a Republican is carrying, R equals good. If it's a bill that a Democrat is carrying, D equals bad. And unfortunately, oftentimes, they're not reading the bills. It's clear they're not reading the bills. They don't know what questions to ask. Oftentimes they don't ask questions at all.
I don't think they're given the opportunity, because that's what I've seen. They give them these bills, and sometimes it's that day and their whole schedule is already filled. There's no way they could read it.
No, I think it's supposed to be a rule that they can file 15 bills per representative, I believe. But some of them, but some of them have special privileges. So they have 144 bills filed, or some erroneous, ridiculous amount, and then it might have an amendment tacked onto it. So thousands and thousands of pages, there's no way.
There's just no way.
No, and so I will give them that.
My favorite was when I went to the town hall meeting, and I don't know if we'll mention name, but one of the legislators had said that, he was not the brightest bulb. I'm paraphrasing. He was more of an athlete. He was a baseball player and a football player. But not to worry, because this bill will be at least 38 pages, but he can read it and break it down for all of us in 15 minutes.
Right.
Now, this coming from the guy who just told you that he didn't do too well in school, and he's not the smartest guy, but he can do this, break it down for you in 15 minutes.
Exactly. And what we were specifically asking for at that point in time was to be given the bill so that we could read it for ourselves and ask the questions that we felt like we needed to ask. And we were promised 7 days. We didn't even get 24 hours.
Not even,
I don't believe.
It wasn't even 12 hours.
Yes, and then the legislators were upset because they were not given.
They weren't given it. Forget the public.
Right, and so they didn't have time. They didn't feel like to read it and study it and ask appropriate questions. So, one thing that I want to highlight here is that one of the reasons why we've been going to the legislature and spending so much time is because we do not trust them. And when you do not trust your elected officials, you know that it's bad.
Yeah.
And the reason why we do not trust them is because we've been lied to repeatedly.
Yeah.
And, I've highlighted those lies over on For Your Children. One of those lies was that we were going to be given ample time to read the bill. We weren't provided that time. Then we were told at one point.
I clipped it actually on my show.
Yes. Yeah. And I shared that, as well, where we were promised that it did not manifest. What I have said over and over, it's a lot of word salad. I mean, they're politicians.
Yeah.
So they know how to manipulate the wording, and they're hoping that the manipulation of that wording will placate the general public into believing that they've all got it under control and that we don't have anything to worry about. What that equates to, by the way, is just sit down, be quiet, don't ask questions, stay at home, don't give us any grief, and then we have the freedom to do whatever it is that we plan on doing with these bills, that we have in the queue, so to speak, as they're running through these committees. But one thing that I noticed, and there were people, in the audience that were recording the circus.
Yeah, sure.
And I turned around at one point and said, "Are you recording the frat party in the corner?" Because one thing that really struck me, quite frankly, I was absolutely embarrassed that our elected officials were behaving so disrespectfully.
Right.
They were on their cell phones, and I've seen this multiple times. We are in session. They are discussing a bill or voting on a bill. They're on their cell phones. They're laughing. They're talking. They're talking over the person presenting the bill. They cannot hear what's going on. They are completely unengaged, and then they vote. And then they vote. Or they're jumping up and down and running in and out of the room, or they're jumping up and they're in one another's ear. And I would like to know, are there no ethical codes of conduct that are required to be followed, by because they're really quick to tell you what you can and can't do when you're there in the committee meetings.
Right.
So, one thing that I would like to see in the future is our elected representatives held to some type of ethical code of conduct when bills are being presented. Yeah, because, my point is, if you're not listening and you haven't read the bill.
Well, the only thing one could deduce from that is that they already went in with a preconceived selection. So they're not actually paying any attention to what's being presented because they already know how they're going to vote.
Absolutely. And, you and I have spoken about this, and we were speaking about it prior to the show getting started, and that is the major lobbying presence at the Capitol. And, my area of expertise. I'm going to use that term loosely because I learn something new every day, and I learn from other wonderful people that are doing research that I've had the wonderful opportunity to interview and learn from them. And you know, the important thing to remember about this is we should be doing research.
Yeah.
And so we have discussed in our circles the lobbying presence. I just recently wrote an article about Americans for Prosperity and Alliance Defending Freedom and ALEC and the presence of those entities, you know, within our legislature. What would you say about the lobbying presence?
Well, it's very strong. There's definitely a very big presence, and they seem to have a lot of money, so there's a lot of funding behind them. I think a lot of that funding is going towards very clever marketing. They're very successful. They have fooled a lot of people into, you know, we've talked about this before, this idea of, you know, the conservatives want a specific marketing and campaign. They get targeted to them, then the, you know, the Republicans who may not be as conservative, whatever it is, but there's a lot of marketing, and a lot of people are very much fooled because they've got the shiny bow and they're in this specific packaging, but then what they're actually peddling is not necessarily aligned if they were really to pay more attention. And I heard this so much, you know, so like Americans for Prosperity, they're very much for school choice, and a lot of people who may identify as being conservative will tell me, well, but they're campaigning for it. They're great. They're wonderful. They're conservative. And I'm like, how much have you actually looked into them? Their funding, the people who are being given the platform to be their mouthpiece.
Yeah, it's really frightening. I think I saw someone post not long ago that all of our legislators should be required to wear NASCAR jumpsuits so we could see who's sponsoring them. And I loved that. I absolutely loved that, because wouldn't that be great when they walk in, we can see who's giving them the most money, and then we just know how they're going to vote, you know?
Totally.
Right out of the gate. And that's the thing that concerns me the most, and you hit the nail on the head when you said, people are so quick to just believe the propaganda, and when you have lots of money and you can buy up lots of platforms, you can say the same things over and over and over, and if you say it enough, people just begin to believe it.
Lie enough times and it becomes true.
That's right. That's
people think so.
And so I see, because I know here locally in Tennessee, we have a large presence on the radio. Of Americans for Prosperity influence. And many of those radio hosts definitely perpetuate the propaganda that AFP is peddling. And so, again, if you're listening to the radio often enough and you're being bombarded with this, and then there are certain conservative news sources that are also, in my opinion, just walking advertisements for AFP, and you can open up publications and see all these ads that Americans for Prosperity are, you know, spamming the articles with. You kind of get an idea of how large their presence is, and it's really concerning. And I said, if you don't have but one takeaway from this legislative session, I feel like it's this. My opinion is that our legislature here in Tennessee has been completely bought and sold by special interest groups.
It does seem that way.
Because I know that there have been, For Your Children has taken polls, you know, which of you homeschoolers want school choice? Which of you private school parents want school choice? And I know I was talking to some other media personalities, and they did the same polls, and they said, hands down, 85% of the public, if not more, they were being conservative in this, have said they do not want tax dollars being used to fund private schools. They do not agree with this legislation. They are not on board. So if the legislators aren't listening to their constituents, who can we deduce that they're listening to at this point? And what I'm seeing, again, this is my opinion, is a lot of political theater that's going on. As we've sat through these committees, you know, we're sitting there, we have the agendas. Sometimes We may have an agenda, we may not have an agenda. It's changing, by the hour. We're going in. One day we were there, and the committee that we were waiting to go into was over an hour late, even starting. We were in the hallways. The kids were sitting on the floor because they were having some kind of celebratory retirement party over on the hill at the Capitol while we're waiting for the House to begin a committee meeting where this voucher, legislation is on the agenda. And I'm thinking, we're paying for them to misuse our money, our time, manipulate our time. Then you get in there and, they decide to cancel committee meetings or, they don't hear bills. And so the general public has made its way to the Capitol specifically because they've read the agenda. And honestly, I believe it's all done on purpose to dissuade the general public from coming and participating in the legislative process.
So too. It's demoralization.
Yes, and it's most normal people cannot take off from work every single day during the legislative session to come to the legislature and sit and make sure that they're doing what they say that they're going to do. It's expensive. We were doing kind of a cost analysis of how much it was costing us to come up to the legislature daily. We don't live close because I don't live here in the Nashville area, so it takes us well over an hour, and that's when traffic's good. And when is traffic ever good in Nashville? Tell me that.
Never.
So it takes us forever to get here. I know the last commute we made in, 840 was closed because there was a piece of equipment that hit a bridge. Then there was an accident on 65 that shut down the interstate, so it took us way out around Nashville on I-440 and shot us back in, and it was like an hour and a half, way out of the way, but we did avoid the traffic and make it here. But we were doing a cost analysis. How much does it cost us to come up here? And at a minimum, and I'm being conservative, $65 to $70 a day to be able to come up between gas, parking, food. Now, mind you, I'm the mom that drags in all these coolers with food and lunch boxes. But if you're there 10 hours, how many coolers and bags can you bring in that's going to, feed 4 people, while you're at the Capitol all day long? So the general public can't afford to do that. And so I think
if they even can have the time, if they can take the time, they can't afford to go.
And I will tell you, we have had homeschooling moms that work full time and homeschool their children use their PTO time to come to these legislative sessions. We have had families take off from work and use sick days to come or just take off, without pay, to be able to try to get a pulse on, what's going on regarding all of this. And I definitely think that they do it on purpose and try to wear us down. To prevent us from being able to exercise those rights.
Well, it's this whole kind of, it's a trap, right? They give you the illusion that we have a say and that we have power and that our voice matters and that it is actually a, constitutional republic, and that we are engaged and our voice can make a difference. And then they do this whole dog and pony show to demoralize us so that we're like, we realize, okay, maybe we really don't, and it's not worth even bothering.
Right. And I think that's the bottom line a lot.
But then the problem is that now it's the cognitive dissonance, right? Because we're told it's a constitutional republic and, we can elect our officials and they work for us. And so now, because that framework has been laid out, they say, well, you just have to come in and you didn't want to. Right, because
no one ever comes to the meetings. That's what you hear. No one ever comes to the meetings. What they don't tell the general public is when people do come to the meetings, they cancel the meetings, they roll the bills, they don't provide you with transparency, or you get pushback like we have seen firsthand from elected officials who aren't necessarily happy that you're there, asking questions. But my perspective in all of this is, an educational perspective. And we kind of linked up because what people don't understand is that what is going on with UNESCO and the WHO and this globalization of education. It doesn't just touch education, it encompasses everything.
Yeah.
So speak to that, Courtney.
Okay. Well, so I'll just give I'll give you the end, the last page of the book first. What they're doing, and you can all go look this up. I'm trying to sound the alarm on it. There's the UN 100. There's the centennial of the UN. The UN was created in 1945. So this is imagining the world 2045. Some of you may have heard of Agenda 2030. They're now talking about Agenda 2045. Agenda 2045 is an AI world society. So they are literally laying out the groundwork and laying out the blueprint. You have, like, imagine Meta, but for the whole world. It is a virtual reality. And they're talking about Ukraine being the central hub for this AI world society. They did a whole symposium where they said we have to rebuild Ukraine. It's decimated by the war. We need to send them money and support. This sounds a little bit like Build Back Better. We have to tear it down first. That's how that works. So they're talking about it being the central locus for, you know, the connected grid to all of these other C40 cities, these 15-minute cities,
The
these
smart cities,
all over the world.
Which are here in Tennessee. I mean, they're bringing, there's already one in Chattanooga, I believe, and weren't they considering one more locally here in Middle Tennessee? I'm not sure.
They were.
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly which one, but yeah, they're all over. Tennessee is a huge, like, UN, WEF hub. So the book, this is done in UN in partnership with Boston Global Forum. Michael Dukakis, some of you may remember, he was the former governor of Massachusetts. He's written a book. It's called Remaking the World, the Age of Global Enlightenment. So this is important because you hear just the title alone. This is very religious. They've talked about how they want not just a one world centralized governing body, but they want a one world religion. And it's because religion is a great tool for them to usher everybody into the same view, the same framework, and to all get on the same page. And
because, correct me if I'm wrong, they essentially want to instill the attitudes, thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors in our children and our citizenry that they deem appropriate.
Absolutely. You know, someone who has been very instrumental, there is a NGO that works with the UN. So some of you may know Lucius Trust is the consultancy for the UN, along with a whole subsidiary of you know, different, like the Arcane School, the Triangles, World Goodwill, that Alice Bailey has created. She was a theosophical leader, a disciple of Madame Blavatsky. Well, there is another NGO that works with the UN, and it's called the World Parliament of Religions. And this started in 1893 at Chicago World Fair. They revived it in 1993. They love their centennials. So they revived it, and now they've been doing it mostly every year. It's not always every year, but they do something. You know, they're constantly working. But Robert Mueller, who some of your audience might be very familiar with, he developed the World Core, the World Core Education Program, which is, of course, known as Common Core, or Charlotte Iserbyt calls it the Communist Core. I think that's more aptly put.
That would be a better description. I would have to agree.
Yes. So he's been very vocal about how there needs to be this, you know, unity of all religions, and that the whole purpose of education is to create, you know, the terms have changed, but essentially a global citizen. You know, Charlotte Iserbyt, who was the whistleblower, talked about how they, in their documents, say the goal is to put every child into a computer. And so what we're seeing now with the education...
We've seen it. We're seeing it. Yes.
We're seeing it. So that's why they're doing all of these tech ed programs, because they data mine the children. So they want to... This is all connected, but the education system is how they... Because he kept saying we need to get the younger generations. I'm talking about Mueller.
And data is big business. There's a lot of money tied to data and the harvesting of the data, you know, on our children. And there's it's not just money, it's power and control, and it's being fed into databases. There's actually legislation in our Tennessee legislature right now. They're wanting to set up statewide longitudinal databases, and Department of Children's Services is going to be funneling data into that. They're going to be sharing data with stakeholders and entities. And then, of course, FERPA allows for a child's data to be harvested without parental consent, and then it can be given to any entity in the name of educational research. And so parents have no idea what data is being harvested, who's getting it, and what they're doing with it. But you and I and many other people understand that this data is being used to create this global citizenry.
And it's programming the children. It's a feedback loop.
Yes.
Because they do the data mining, and then they figure out how they can use it to then program and control.
Absolutely. And the digital curriculum the children are using, it's generated based on how the kids answer the questions. So if the child doesn't answer the question the right way, they keep re-asking it in different ways until they condition that child to answer it according to the thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors and attitudes that the state says are what they need to be adopting. So it's operant conditioning. That's exactly, and it's all tied into the digital currency. There's an AI bill that has been moving its way through the legislature to make it safer to be, and when I read this, I'm thinking, why are we even allowing this? Why do we even want AI? And of course, you and I have discussed this. It's not parameters on the actual capabilities of AI. It's parameters on the
people using it.
That's right. Yes.
In the AI World Society, they actually call human beings objects. They're digital objects. They say that all governments will cease to be run by humans. It will all be run by AI. They have AI citizens. And I just wanted to address, because we talked about how, like what a circus politics are, and locally, and how corrupt it really is. And I still encourage everybody to get involved, because what is happening, at least from my perspective, in my opinion, from the research I've done and from what I've seen locally, is there is an agenda that is being driven from a very large macro scale. And this is trickling down, and not every local politician knows this.
Correct.
I think a lot of them are being influenced by, there's actually a CIA document, it's called the Mice to Rascals. So MICE stands for money, ideology. The C has a double entendre. It's coercion or compromise. And then the E is ego. They now changed it to rascals. They figured this was a better, we'll save that for another day, but a better way to create assets. But the mice is still very much at play. And that's, so on a smaller scale, you have all these public-private partnerships.
Yes.
As you said, small, special interest groups. And I think that's what's driving a lot of these. But the macro agenda is driving the local politics. And this is why I think it's so important for people to get involved locally, because if we can create little buffers and bulwarks, because they're masters of incrementalism. So they're laying the groundwork with every bill and the politicians may not know that, because a lot of times I get pushback and they say, well, this has nothing to do with that. I'm like, really?
Exactly.
Why do you think it's coming up now?
Exactly. Yeah. And we have to be engaged, and we have to do our research. I keep saying that over and over because I can't express it enough, because we have become a society that doesn't read. We have become a society that doesn't research.
The TLDR.
Absolutely. And so what Courtney and I both want to share with you today is do that research, do that reading, tap into resources. If you have questions, reach out and ask them. I say this often, the only dumb question is one that you don't ask. So if you don't understand exactly what we're talking about, reach out. We'd be happy to explain it in more detail. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight with Free Your Children TV. We love you here at Free Your Children, and remember, we'll see you again.